be recorded and it will be posted on YouTube. So if you have missed any of the previous discussions, you may find it on YouTube. Also, if you have any questions, please feel free to unmute yourself and ask. Please use the raise hand option feature of Zoom in order to maintain the queue. If you are not speaking, please mute yourself to minimize the disturbances. Thank you.
Thank you.
This meeting is being recorded.
Thank you and good evening. Yogena chittasya padena vacham malam sharirasya cha vaidyakena yopakarurtam pravaram muninam patanjalim pranjaliranatosmi stuve patanjalim vyasam shankaram cha munitrayam kartrasutrasya bhashyasya kramadvivaranasya cha. We are discussing the 22nd Sutra of Samadhipada. Those of you, and maybe just a few of you may be joining for the first time, so we have already completed the Sadhanapada and Vibhudipada, and we are taking Samadhipada as the third chapter. A slightly different chronology from the standard printed textbooks. So this 22nd sutra is Murdu Madhyama Adhimatratvat Tatopi Visheshaha. Of course, this sutra is to be completed. So, I mean, before the beginning there is a tataha. Therefore means in the context of what we discussed in the previous sutra. That's the meaning. So this is directly linked to the previous sutra, the 21st one. And in the 21st sutra we discussed Tivra Samveganam Asannaha. That is the sutra 21st. Which means those who practice yoga with a great intensity, with a great focus and dedication, for them the result is nearer. They reach the goal faster than others who may not have the same level of intensity. So intensity plays a very important role. This is an important thing. Of course, it's a general principle that is applicable to all spiritual disciplines. I mean, when we are intent on doing something, we are indirectly or unconsciously bringing together all the energy resources, the physical, the intellectual, the mental energy resources are intensely focused on whatever we do. So that intense effort will take us faster to the goal. That's the idea. So that is the context of the 22nd sutra. That means tatopi, there is a word tatopi, means in that context of tivra samvega, in the context of intensity, there are three levels. In other words, there are three levels of intensity to be taken into consideration. And that is tatopi murdu madhyama adhimatratvat. That is very gentle, then moderate and excessive. Three levels of intensity. More or less this is true maybe in all areas of human effort, even in the empirical world. With whatever work you do, whatever work you are engaged in, you are able to reach the goal much more easily and much faster when you focus all your energies on a single focus. That makes whatever we do much more effective and much more efficient and produces better results. So that is the idea. Now this is a central principle here. So Now, what it means is something very important. What it means is when we practice yama, niyama, etc., mostly yamas and niyamas, if we have complete devotion and application into what we are doing, total intensity, sincerity, then we move faster towards dharana, dhyana, and samadhi. That's the idea behind. And of course, there is a way to increase this intensity. And that is mentioned here in the 23rd Sutra, Ishvara Pranidhanat Va. So that's again directly related to Tivra Samvega and Mrudu Madhyama Adhimatra. 3 levels of intensity. What it means is when we have a sense of dedication, devotion, or a self-surrender, a sense of total resignation to God, then intensity increases. Then we become much more intense. Very often, of course, there are 2 important contexts this in the Yoga Sutra literature, Yoga Sutras themselves, where Ishvara Pranidhana is clearly mentioned. One is in Sadhanapada, the first sutra. It defines Kriya Yoga, Tapaswadhyaya Ishvara Pranidhananani Kriya Yoga. The Ishvara Pranidhana or self-surrender, resignation, what we normally in Sanskrit devotional philosophy, we call it Prapatti or Sharanagati, or maybe in Christian mysticism, also this is frequently used in the autobiographical writings of mystics. You can, those who are interested, you can find these in St. Augustine's, both these well-known classics, the Confessions and City of God. The idea of total surrender. Of course, there are some areas where the implications could be different from what it means in Yoga Sutra, but the idea of total self-surrender to a higher ideal, that is mentioned in the Sadhanapada when Patanjali defines Kriya Yoga. But in that context, according to commentators like Vajaspati and Vijnana Bhikshu and others, the meaning is Bhakti Yoga. Now, Vijnana Bhikshu often links many of these Yoga Sutra ideas to the classical Hindu devotional disciplines like Karma Yoga, Bhakti Yoga, etc. But here it has got a different implication, not unrelated, but still somewhat different, because eventually Patanjali is going to define what's the place of God in the yoga system. We should remember that the philosophical background of yoga comes from Sankhya philosophy, which is essentially an agnostic or even it could be an atheistic system of philosophy which doesn't accept or affirm the reality of a God, of a personal God. In Sankhya system, it doesn't accept a God idea, in fact, because according to Kapila and his followers, Prakriti or nature itself, in its evolutionary process, explains the whole mystery of creation, preservation of the species so created, and also the ultimate destiny. Without the assistance of a belief in God, there's something very interesting. So, the Sankhya idea of evolution from Prakriti to Mahat Tattva, that is cosmic intelligence, and from that cosmic intelligence, 3 dimensions of Ahankara or I consciousness awareness, Sattvika, Rajasika and Tamasika. From these 3 different levels of Ahankara, the 5 senses of perception, 5 senses of action, the Jnana Indriyas and Karma Indriyas, mind, and of course this empirical phenomenal world, all these emerge, all these are evolutes of this Ahankara from 3 levels of Ahankara. Sattvika, Tamasika and Rajasika, Ahankara. So this evolution itself is self-explanatory. We don't have to look for a transcendental creator God or a kind of transcendental intelligence to explain creation. So in that respect, of course it comes very close to the doctrine of biological selection, or maybe the Darwinian concept of evolution. But one important point is Patanjali explains the evolution or the creation of intelligence, that is mind, the sensations, the feelings, all these in the context of samskaras, tendencies and impressions, and not entirely based on matter as understood in the Darwinian system, in the world of physics. That's an area of difference. So I'm not going to those details. But in yoga system, Patanjali does accept a God. But that God, that is the Ishvara, as mentioned in the Sutra, 23rd Sutra, Ishvara Pranidhana Va, or by devotion to Ishvara. That means this Nirodha, the ultimate goal of Yoga Chitta Vritti Nirodha, the Vritti Nirodha eventually which takes us to Samadhi. That Vritti Nirodha can be attained by surrendering, by resigning everything to God. This is a possible option. Va means vikalpa, an option is given. If you don't follow all this just by surrendering to God, it has got a deep psychological value which I am going to explain in course of time. So the point is, yoga system accepts a God idea. But again, that God idea is different from what it implies in the popular monotheistic systems of religious philosophical schools, because a God creates this world and there is a process of creation. And that's not what you find here. The God, or the Ishvara, the Sanskrit word for God, implies here an ancient teacher who is totally free from all kinds of impurities, ignorance, limitations. I mean the essential totality of all knowledge. Sarvajñatva, the word is used here. So the commentators take pains to clearly draw a line of demarcation. What's the difference between this God, this ultimate guru? The definition comes here, sometimes here. Saha purvesham api guruhu kalena anavachedad. That is the 26th sutra, which we will discuss in course of time. So that God is a teacher of even the ancient teachers, because he is unlimited by time, is beyond time. Kalena anavachedat. It's an inferential statement which we discuss in course of time. So the point is, Patanjali accepts a God idea. But then that God is not one who creates and sustains and preserves the universe, who listens to our prayers, who distributes the results of our actions, and who again has got, of course, I'm not going to the details, in the popular Hindu monotheistic systems and also in the Abrahamic traditions, there is a received perception and interpretation of God everywhere you can find. That's not the real meaning of God according to Patanjali system. Please remember, I am not in agreement or in disagreement with Patanjali or anywhere. I'm just giving an objective view of from a philosophical perspective. So, Ishvara Pranidhana, Vyasa makes that point clear. He says, the word itself is very important from Sanskrit language point of view. Prakashena nithiyate manaha anena iti. That means, when you completely surrender all your impulses, feelings, and tendencies to a supreme idea, supreme person. That process is called pranidhana, means surrender. So pranidhanan bhakti visheshad avarjita ishvaraha tam anugrihnadi abhidhyana matrena. So Vyasa Bhashya says, now that Ishvara, when he is pleased by our resignation to him and by our intense devotion, then he favors the yoga practitioner by his mere sankalpa, that means abhidhyana matrena means sankalpa matrena. Even by a will, that God blesses the yogi, and the yogi gets this samadhi, or it's called chittavritti nirodha. So that's the central point here. Vajaspati has also got its own meaning. Abhidhyana matrena means because of intense devotion. Now, in reality, how this works? If you want to get a very secular, non-religious approach to God idea, you can read Hume, modern man in search of a God, you can search of a soul, I think that's the meaning. So, and he says, you need a belief in God, at least for the practical use, that practical usefulness of it. It means if you, so it's very interesting. So it's not such a construct, a philosophical construct that we create artificially. A sincere belief in a supreme divine person who is the essential totality of goodness, not numerical totality, but essential. There's a difference between essential totality and numerical totality. Numerical totality means you put all this together and it is God. The God means kindness, goodness, compassion, mercy, and so on. And it's God. Not in that sense, but rather God is the very essence of all these great qualities. Kindness, goodness, compassion, etc. When you have a sincere faith in that reality, and then when you sincerely surrender yourself to that divine will, a huge weight, as it were, seems to be taken off your shoulders, and it has been proved, at least I have read in some books, that a sincere believer can achieve lowering of hypertension and many other anxieties, and many of these worries can be reduced by a sincere faith in God. That is the very empirical, very ordinary understanding of it. But there is a much deeper implication behind this. When we sincerely believe in a divine cosmic person, cosmic entity, which is the essential totality of all greatness and all goodness that we can think of, then what happens? Our mind seems to be enriched, spiritually invigorated and energized, and that gives us a tremendous sense of confidence and ability to withstand problems, and also this constant thinking when the mind is focused on that cosmic reality, our mind also slowly gets purified. It gets a sublime feeling, it becomes a sublime experience. You feel a kind of inner fulfillment. This idea, of course, in a Hindu Vaishnava tradition, according to Ramanuja, Ramanuja calls prapatti or sharanagati, means surrender. And he gives 6 qualifications for a person to be able to completely practice this spiritual ideal. It means anukulyasya sankalpaha pradikulyasya varjanam rakshasiti vishwasa goptrutta varanam tatha Atmanikshepakarpanne Shadvidha Sharanagati. That's how Ramanuja, maybe in Gatitraya, he defines. Always having a positive, appropriate feeling towards God and rejecting all negative tendencies, questions or doubts or skepticism and so on. And in a strong faith, God is our protector, God will protect us. And again, a kind of total self-surrender to this higher spiritual power. And of course, a feeling of feeling and kind of aversion towards anything that stand in the way of our spiritual journey or this practice of bhakti or devotion. Now, if a devotee practices all this, it becomes Sharanagati. And this actually gives us a kind of inner fulfillment, inner enrichment, really speaking. And when we sincerely feel that, when we sincerely believe, and when we sincerely do surrender ourselves to this divine will, then it becomes psychologically difficult for us to consciously do something wrong, consciously. And if we do that, then our mind itself will revolt. Mind itself will revolt against us if we sincerely believe. And then the moment we try to do something wrong, which we may call totally unspiritual or immoral thing, then our own mind will start acting as a guide sitting from within. A kind of self-correcting mechanism is installed in our own internal system, our mental system. That's what really happens when we practice this Ishvara Pradhanat Va. So Patanjali gives this Va means otherwise or. That's the meaning or. So in some cases in the devotional philosophy in India, this is the highest and also this is the beginning. This is the highest reach, the highest goal of a true devotee of God is to be able to practice this self-surrender in its totality. Only a very great devotee will be able to do that. We just got another aspect. Without some degree of self-surrender, no one can really undertake his spiritual journey. So at the beginning also there is a kind of self-surrender, and as the ultimate goal also there is a kind of self-surrender. The latter is the ultimate goal, the highest spiritual attainment, the highest spiritual wisdom, and the former is the natural first step in our spiritual journey. Of course, here you can find, I can refer to Yogavartika Vijnana Bhikshu, where he actually quotes statements from Vedas, from Upanishads, to underline this idea. So, and he says, Ataeva Sruti Smriti Puranadishu Prayashu Brahmajnanameva Moksha Hetutaya Upadishyate. So what he says is, in the Vedas, Sruti, Smriti and Purana, the Vedas, the Puranic mythological literature, and also in the Smriti literature, it is mentioned that the ultimate knowledge of Brahman, the realization of Brahman, is the only way to spiritual liberation, moksha hetu, the only cause of moksha or liberation. So here Vijnana Bhikshu is actually quoting, is referring to some of the great statements in the Upanishads. Kadaji devatu swadandrena jivatattvajnanamiti. So he says only once a while they say something about jiva should practice, work, strive, do, practice with a great intensity. But more importance is given to the real attainment of Brahmajnanam, knowledge of Brahman, as the only means for the highest liberation. Yadi cha ubhayoreva tulyatva vikalpaha. Suppose there's an option available here. Tarhi tameva viditva adimurtimedi nanyapantha vidyate ayanaya tamevaigam jnanatha atmanam anyavacho vimunjatha amudasyaiva setuhu ityadi sudibhyo vyagurye tatha. So the point is that this statement is very important. So Vijnana Bhikshu says, but suppose there is an option given, either that's for attaining moksha, liberation, let us say in the context of Patanjali Yoga Sutra, Chitta Vritti Nirodha Samadhi. Highest is Asamprajnata Samadhi. Suppose there is an option. Well, one option is a devotee, a practitioner, should fully focus on what he is practicing. Tivra samvega means extreme intensity. With his own effort, he can attain Chitta Vritti Nirodha. Supposing. Or there is another option. The other option is Ishwar Pranidhana. And here, Vijnana Bhikshu, the great commentator, is the author of Yoga Bhashya Vartikam. It's based on Vyasa's commentary. He says, in that context, the more importance should be given, preference should be given to to attaining Brahmajnanam, realization of Brahman, because that alone can eventually take you to liberation. So that total focus, total concentration on attaining realization of Brahman, Jiva Brahmaikyam, as mentioned in the Upanishad, Vedanta scriptures, not in yoga literature, that should be given preference. This is Vijnana Bhikshu's statement. Remember, why I'm quoting this? In popular understanding of Yoga Sutra these days, they never refer to Vedanta scriptures. For the first time, historically, modern times especially, it was Swami Vivekananda who gave a very sensible, logical interpretation of Yoga Sutras. And in Swami Vivekananda's interpretation, Swami Vivekananda brings in Vedantic ideas. Because without bringing in Vedantic ideas, Yoga Sutra literature, Yoga Sutra studies will be incomplete. The conclusions of yoga cannot be philosophically very acceptable to a logical mind, because it begins with Dvaita, dualism, pluralism, and it ends there. Of course, yoga is popular because of yoga asana, not because of yoga philosophy, but still, since we are dealing with Patanjali's Yoga Sutras, which explain the philosophical, the metaphysical background of yoga system, so I'm giving this, I'm referring to Vijnana Bhikshu. So great commentators like Vijnana Bhikshu, he brings in all the great spiritual ideas from the ancient Hindu philosophical spiritual classics like Upanishads, Gita, different Puranas, and then he gives a very logical interpretation of Patanjali system as a journey towards one's own spiritual liberation, towards realization of God. So that should be kept in mind. The reason why this is very important is this. In modern times, we frequently try to avoid the bhakti element, the devotional element, the actual spiritual element of yoga practice, even while teaching Yoga Sutras. That's why I'm actually made it a point to refer to Vijnana Bhikshu. Of course, Swami Vivekananda is enough, but just give an example, that's all. Now, after that, the next sutra, of course, Patanjali gives a definition, further explanation of Ishvara. Klesha karma vipakasyehi aparamrishtaha purusha vishesha Ishvara. And what kind of a being this Ishvara is? This Ishvara is a special type of Purusha who is untouched by klesha, karma, fruition, means phala and latent deposit. So I shall try to explain this. In other words, you know klesha, pancha klesha, avidya, asmita, raga, desha, abhinivesha, klesha, means it comes in the sadhana pada itself. And then different karmas, karmasya, punya and papa, whatever we have done in the past, all the karmas produce vrittis, vrittis become samskaras. These samskaras may be good, sometimes may not be so very good. So the good samskaras, good tendencies coming from previous actions in previous life cycles or in this life cycle itself. It's called punya, means auspicious, meritorious, and papa means inauspicious, maybe we may call it negativity. So according to Patanjali system, all problems that we normally put under the umbrella term of negativity in modern times is it's just like unhealthy food coming back to can imagine, suppose you have eaten something which is not so very good, unhealthy food, poisonous food, unhygienic food, you have eaten, but suddenly it comes back to your mouth, how it will be like? Not a very pleasant experience. So every negativity, anxiety, worry, skepticism, incessant doubt, tendency to be skeptical all the time, absolute no contentment, no satisfaction, a feeling of inner incompleteness all the time, terrible. We call it maybe the different manifestations of negativity. These manifestations, which we call negativity, is nothing but poisonous food that we are given to our mind through our actions, our thoughts and deeds coming back to us. And the only way to counter that negativity is, from a practical point of view, to do good things, to speak good things, to do good things, to read good things, and to fill our mind with good food, healthy food. Spiritual practices, reading great books, listening to great ideas, thinking always in a very positive mood. Then what happens? The weight of this negativity will be reduced. So that is called karma. So the Ishvara is defined as a being who is untouched, totally free from the influences of kleshas, avidya, smita, raga, desha, abhinivesha, karma, and also the results of this karma. What are the results? Misery and so on. And of course, vasanas. Vasanas and samskara. These are not too different, they are linked to each other. Samskaras are deposits in our mental system. Vasanas are those samskaras taking an action-oriented form. So let's say, for example, a child, little small baby, who may have seen his parents playing violin or playing music from his early days. When he goes to school, if there's an option where you can learn music or you can learn gymnastics or you can learn something else, the child may have a natural tendency to opt music rather than anything else. That is an example of vasana. Why vasana? Vasana is there because of samskara. Samskara means tendencies. The child has already imbibed the samskaras, listening to music when he's very small. Or of course in the yoga system and Buddhism and Hinduism, it could also be a hangover, a residual effect coming from previous life cycles as well. So, Ishvara or this divine being is defined as an entity free from klesha, karma, and karma phala. Means karmas I already explained, then results of these karmas, and also vasanas, tendencies, an aptitude related to action. The 25th and 26th sutras actually are trying to explain this God idea in yoga system with the help of an inference, a tool in epistemology. As I mentioned earlier, in Hinduism, mainstream Hinduism, if you extend it to the farthest level, it has got 10 tools of knowledge, in theory of knowledge, called epistemology, as a branch of philosophy, like logic, metaphysics, and so on. One is pratyaksha, anumana, upamana, shabda, arthavatya, anubalabdhi, sambhava, aitihya, cheshta, parisheshya. These are the 10 types of tools of knowledge in Hinduism, of which actually inference is very important, because many of the other extra elements of theory of knowledge are in a way more or less included in inference. So inference is very, very important. Direct perception is directly followed by inference. That is true in Aristotelian logic, also in, of course, in the Greek philosophy also. Now, tatra here means in this context, in the context of discussing on Ishvara, sarvajñatva bijam means something that tells you that God is omniscient. Sarvajñatva means omniscience, all-knowing things, means the idea of all omniscience, so to call, omniscience, knowing everything. So, in this context, sarvajñatva bijam means something that tells you, that reveals the existence of omniscience in God. Niratisaya. It means whatever you know in its higher or complete, universal, infinite dimension, God has got. So I shall read the next one also, then you understand if that is put in the language of the classical anumana. Anumana is the inference. Sa purveshamabi guruhu kalena anavachedad. And this Ishvara, he is purveshamabi guruhu, he is the most ancient teacher and is beyond time. These are two statements. Now, first of all, this sutra should be understood very clearly. I mean, this is yoga idea of knowledge. In fact, surprisingly, if you are traveling by air, if you find somebody sitting next to you, and then he may tell you, there are people who are very proud of their intellectual, at least what they consider to be their intellectual freedom, of course, sometimes bordering on intellectual arrogance also. You find, I don't believe in God, but I believe that there is some universal, transcendental something. That I believe, but I don't believe in God. In fact, that belief is what is implied here. You know what it means is, every person has got knowledge. Now, our knowledge may be always finite. In the sense, we got that knowledge from a university, from a professor, from a book, maybe listening to lectures and so on. So, whatever knowledge we get is finite. Of course, there is within us the seed of infinite knowledge, But this knowledge can really become our knowledge when we become aware of that knowledge that we already have within us only when we connect with something, somebody. Either it could be in the form of a book, a teacher, a lecturer, a speaker, or anything. Or in a conversation also you may learn from another person. So without that connection, our inherent knowledge doesn't really manifest. And all knowledge that we have is by its very nature is finite. And this idea of finite knowledge cannot exist without a hypothetical idea of infinite knowledge. So this is the inference. In fact, so Isharaha Sarvajnaha Niradisayajnanavatvat Yennaivam Tannaivam Yatha Anya Purusha. This is the Anumana. This old Anumana Prayoga, I mean Anumana Vakyam. I'm using this old Indian school of the language of Indian logic, Nayayika. Means we have knowledge, and our knowledge is infinite, and that infinite knowledge that we have that knowledge is finite. Remember, when we speak, we have a knowledge. That knowledge is finite because we may have gathered knowledge from a book, from a teacher, and so on. But that knowledge, which is finite that we have, has got an infinite dimension. We may call infinite dimension, so to speak. It has got an infinite dimension. So, and that infinite dimension is Sarvajnatva, God. So, this idea behind. So, whatever knowledge we have, so far as we know right now, is finite, limited, and that finite, limited knowledge has got an unlimited, infinite dimension. That's how you think. We have to conceive of an infinite dimension of what we know in its finite level. We should think, we naturally have to conceive of an unlimited dimension of the limited knowledge that we have. So if you think of the essence of this infinite, unlimited knowledge, that is Ishvara according to yoga system. So that's why he says klesha karma vipaka seihi aparamrishtaka purusha vishesha. That's why such an Ishvara, because he is the very essence of infinite knowledge, omniscience, he is totally free from any kind of limitations in terms of klesha, karma, and karma phala or samskara. This is the yoga idea of Ishvara. Such an Ishvara, he is not one who listens to your prayers and gives you some results in return to your actions. No. That Ishvara is an ancient teacher. So, and this is the yoga concept of Ishvara. Now remember, from this Ishvara to the Hindu monotheistic idea of an Ishvara, like Vishnu, Shiva, Shakti, according to the respective groups of denominations, it's not a long distance. This Ishvara idea or God idea to the idea of God that you find in the writings of ancient Abrahamic tradition, like Christian mysticism, maybe Jewish mysticism, Buddhist traditions. It's not a long distance. Maybe difference in degrees, not a difference in kind. So this is the yoga idea of God. This is an important point to remember. Of course, The word guru is used here. That's because there should be a source. If you have learned a skill or a kind of any knowledge from a teacher, that teacher must have learned from another teacher, and there should be an unbroken succession of that knowledge. Now, if you claim you have not learned it from a teacher, a person, but from a book, then the writer of that book happens to be the source of the knowledge that you have got. So that person actually takes the place of a teacher. So if you extend it further, there should be one ultimate teacher from whom every knowledge, every skill must have come. This is the yoga idea of a God. Now, as I mentioned, this comes very close to the idea of the so-called transcendental intelligence, or whatever you may call it, which agnostics are willing to accept, but they are not willing to accept the general received interpretations of God is found in scriptures. And after this we have the well-known sutra that will take you to the concept of pranava or onkara as understood by Patanjali system. That is, I think, that is 27th sutra. 27th sutra. Tasya vachaka pranavaha. Vachaka means something that reveals a word that reveals something. The clock is a vachaka because it reveals that entity, the object, which is the clock, like that. So, here, this sutra tells you that Ishwarasya means vachaka, means the word, the sabda, the word kulabhidayakam, the word that is used to indicate this God is Onkara, Pranava. Now this is, of course, this discussion is going to be very important. It also deals with this idea of Pranava as a pratika, as a symbol, word symbol. Now, first of all, I shall explain this. Pranava means here Om, as you mean Om. Om is not it should not be uttered as a short vowel, not even a long vowel. It should be a longer vowel. It's called Pluta. Hraswa, Dirgha, Pluta means. 1 unit Hraswa means short, 2 unit maybe we can roughly say long, and more than 2 long. See, it is Om, like that. This is the real pronunciation of Om. It is not Om or that. That's wrong. So, this particular word symbol is described here as the word or as the verbal symbol that indicates Ishvara. This is the essence of it. Why this Om, this Onkara becomes the symbol of Ishvara? Well, first of all, from a common sense understanding, when any name if you use, God, God, or Vishnu, or Shiva, or Brahma, anything, either any tradition, all those words are actually limited in their possibilities, because Vishnu Vyapnoti Vishnu. Shiva means the auspiciousness, and so on. So also you find any word used in any language to indicate God is actually limited, that because every word has to be, by its very nature, limited in its scope. The word has to evolve from a root or some kind of a word symbol. So that itself is a inescapable limitation. But on the other hand, Om, on the other hand, Akara, Ukara and Makara mean A, U, Ma. These are three um, three elements which constitute Om. Even according to the principles of Sandhi, vertical conjunction, is also true. Now, when the first of all, A is pronounced with mouth open. U is pronounced mouth half closed. Ma is pronounced with mouth fully closed. And in fact, in Sanskrit grammar, in the Paninian system, there is a way of explaining this, which according to Panini Sutras, which I am not going to detail, but I shall try to explain the different meanings of this Om according to Panini system. It has got 19 different meanings, especially for those who practice this Pranavopasana, Omkaropasana. But why it is so important? It is so impersonal. That's why it is so important. Why it is so impersonal? You know, whatever we speak, every word we utter, every consonant, every vowel, Vyanjanakshara, Surakshara, we call it, or every diphthong, anything that you utter, will have to be uttered either with mouth closed, open, or half open, or in between, which means akara, ukara, makara, a, u, ma, practically accommodate and include. It is an all-inclusive phenomenon. So it means whatever you can think of and point out is included in this. Which means Om is the name of the totality of existence. It is the name of totality of existence. And if you have got one word to indicate totality of existence, then it goes against the basic logic, because when you use the word box or book, you are using this is a book, this is nothing else. When you say this is a clock, then you exclude everything else other than the clock. If it is a wall, you exclude everything other than the wall. But if you use the word Om, it includes everything in existence. In other words, it is the abhidayaka, means it is the verbal symbol which denotes the totality of existence. That is one important thing. Secondly, according to Vedantic tradition, these three elements which constitute Om, A, U and Ma, they are respectively represent all that we experience in waking state, in dream state and deep sleep state, which together constitute the totality of our existence or experience. The totality of our experience and the totality of our existence are the same. So, whatever we are aware of, whatever we become aware of, in the triple levels of our consciousness or awareness, in waking state, in dream state and deep sleep state, and whatever we can think of or conceive of, and whatever we think of will have a word symbol. All these are included in Om. In other words, it indicates the totality of existence, totality of knowledge. And totality of knowledge and existence give us bliss. Now, this is frequently used for Advaita discipline practice, for practicing Advaita, called Advaita Upasana, which is called Pranavopasana or Omkaropasana. And this is one aspect. Of course, I am trying to give an idea of why this Om practically includes all possible human endeavors, awareness and dispositions. So the Panini has got a Dhatu Pada. According is more than 2000 roots in Panini. So according to Panini, the Panini system, the word Om comes from a dhatu root called Ava, means, and this Ava root has got 19 different meanings. Rakshana, Gati, Kranti, Preeti, Tripti, Avagama, Pravesha, Sravana, Swamitvam, Yachana, Kriya, Icha, Deepti, Vyapti, Alingana, Himsa, Yachana, Dana, Bhoga, Vruddhishu. This is the Panini Sutra. All these are the 19 implications, 19 experiences, 19 forms of disciplines which are indicated by the single root Ava, from which Omkara or Pranava comes. So in ancient times, the Pranavobhasana was very important. I think if you privately ask even an agnostic yoga practitioner who is listening to or maybe practicing the chanting of Om, you will find that when you begin that Omkara recitation from silence, you travel for some time as you chant it with sufficient, taking enough time, and when you conclude, actually the breathing system gets regulated, really speaking. And that's why people feel an inner peace, tranquility, and so on. So that's because in its different meanings, it means protection, movement, journey to a spiritual destination, energy, inner contentment, inner satisfaction as a preeti and tripti, the knowledge. Then you feel that you are entering in the world of knowledge. You feel a kind of inner self-restraint, inner control, and inner light. You feel a kind of expansiveness within. So, in other words, those who practice this Omkara with this understanding of the meaning, they get the reap great benefits. Of course, we need not think of this beyond this, because that is beyond the scope of Patanjali Yoga Sutras. But I'm just trying to give a logical explanation of why and how the Pranava or Omkara is designated as the word, a symbol indicating God, the God idea in the yoga system. Okay, now we will have question answers. Most welcome. Yeah.
Pranam.
Namaskar. Yeah.
So, the Ishvara is defined Purve Samapi Guru. How does the Ishvara teach the others? Does Ishvara take birth or incarnate in different realms where other Purishas are?
In Patanjali system, there is no description of this Ishvara, this God taking incarnations. That is found only in the monotheistic scriptures. So, of course, it is very well explained in the Gita, yada yada hi dharmasya glanir bhavati bharata abhyudhanam dharmasya tad atmanam sujamikam. So it is a spiritual mechanism that operates constantly, right from infinite. Is an infinite spiritual mechanism functioning whenever there is this imbalance in dharma. When dharma goes down, decreases, and adharma increases, a divine being manifests and puts the clock in right order, put the balance in order. Of course, it may be once in a few thousands of years, it could be once in a few hundreds of years. Anyway, so that is how incarnation, Ishvara's avatars, incarnations are explained in the monotheistic Hindu scriptures, from which Vijnana Bhikshu and sometimes even Vyasa quotes. So that's the idea behind it. Patanjali's Ishvara is a particular category. So you cannot really ask this question to Patanjali, because he won't he would say, remember, so one thing to remember, you see, Patanjali's system did not have a dedicated following the way Shakta, Saiva, Vaishnava, or in modern times, either Sikh, Buddhist, Christian, Islamic, or Buddha, or Jewish, or Parsi, religious denominations. Patanjali did not have such a group of people following his faith system as a distinct denomination. That is an important point to remember. Sankhya there were just a few philosophers who called themselves Sankhyas, but they went to temple also. All the Patanjali commentators were great devotees who worshipped all deities, Shiva, Vishnu, Lakshmi, all that you find. So that's an important thing to remember. So, if you cannot really go deeper into the philosophical implications of yoga concept of God, it is a category that Patanjali explains. So I explain this in the light of the traditional commentators. That's all. Yeah. It's always important to remember all the yoga interpreters except the Buddhist interpreters, the Vijnanavadins, there is called Yogacharas, all others were staunch devotees, practitioners of devotional traditions, except the Vijnanavada. There's a subjective idealist among the Buddhist idealists, Mahayana Buddhism. All others were great practitioners of devotional schools.
Hari Om Maharaj.
Hari Om, yeah.
Maharaj, I feel like I have a contradiction in the definition of Ishvara, and so will you please explain this to me? So one thing which is said in the 24th Sutra is that Ishvara is a special kind of Purusha, which is who is untouched by misery, actions, totally free from the influence of kleshas. Right? And the way I understand it, a Purusha is an entity, while there is also the other thing that you said where an idea of finite knowledge cannot exist without a hypothetical idea of infinite knowledge. So that infinite dimension is Sarvajyatvam, or God, or Ishvara. So is Ishvara an entity? Because Ishvara is a Purusha, so is it actually a personal entity, or is it an idea?
Yeah, in fact, Patanjali conceives Ishvara as an entity. Purusha is used here. And again, it's mentioned, Klesha karma vipakasyehi aparamnishtaha. So somebody who is free from klesha, karma phala and all, samskaras, etc. Now, so naturally it's a Purusha. Now, why the same Ishvara is described to be Sarvajna, all-knowing, omniscient? Actually, these two sutras are trying to explain the reason why we need to think of an ancient, all-knowing, original teacher. And how can there be an original teacher? So, for that, a mechanism of reference called Anumana, Vakya, that inference is used. All of us have got some knowledge. And our knowledge is limited. Even the most learned person can only have limited knowledge, because that learned person may live for 120 years, at the most 100 years. That means his knowledge will exist only for such a short period. That is against limitation. So there is no such thing as omniscience at the ordinary human jiva level. But then, so it is finite, limited. Now, how can you call it finite or limited without conceiving of something infinite and unlimited? When you say this box is small, you should always think of a box that is bigger. smaller or bigger, small cannot be conceived of except with the logical possibility of something that is not small, which means that is something big. So this is the inference. So Patanjali is using this. It's not a very pleasant, entertaining subject to discuss unless you are interested in logic, which is one of the most boring subjects for those who are not interested. Not for me. I enjoy hearing that. So the point is, even in Western tradition, in Socrates used this method. All the way from Socrates to modern. His questioning method was the same method, more or less. Of course, a simpler form, only 3 levels of thought process. So, inference is the natural way of associating something that we have with something that we may not have, but still should exist. So, because you have finite knowledge, there should be something like infinite knowledge, and then there should be somebody with infinite knowledge. So that's why it is a kind of inferential statement. That's all.
Thank you, Maharaj.
Yeah, thank you.
Namaskar, Maharaj.
Namaskar. Yeah.
Namaskar, Maharaj.
Namaskar. Most welcome.
Isha Ray Chaudhary from Canada.
Oh, most welcome. Thank you.
Thank you very much, because you sent me the information. That's why I could join your class.
Oh, thank you. It has been going on for the last or more than a year. You can see the previous issues.
I was not aware of that.
Yeah.
Anyway, I know Maharaj, all committees are offering fantastic lecture. But Maharaj, I have a question. With reference to the word sound of Om, Uma, you talked about this Panini having 19 or some number of sutras for explaining those sounds. Would it apply, all those sutras, would it apply only to Sanskrit language, or it can apply to any language?
Oh yeah. Panini wrote this famous book, that's a Bible, the Genesis of Sanskrit grammar. It's called Ashtadhyayi, 8 chapters, 8 adhyayas, and that is the basis of Sanskrit grammar. That is basically a book on Sanskrit grammar only. From Paninian system, other language systems evolved. Most of Indian languages which we have right now in India, except Tamil and some northeastern languages, which of course we are very recent, may not have their own script except the Roman script. So except Tamil, I think all other Indian languages are more or less indebted directly to Sanskrit, and Sanskrit vocabulary and also Sanskrit grammatical system completely influenced all other language systems in India, except maybe the Tamil language. So only language is independent of Sanskrit influence. So it's basically a text, the Bible of Sanskrit grammar, Sanskrit only. Panini's time was sometime in 9th century BC, 900 years before Christ.
So Maharaj, what about the other non-Indo-Aryan languages? Would it apply?
Excuse me?
What happens to the others outside the Indo-Aryan group of languages? What happens to the other European language or English?
Oh yeah. Well, that's in the connection between Sanskrit, especially Vedic Sanskrit, which predates Panini's work. What Panini did was, he went round all over Indian subcontinent, which is today, at that time included Afghanistan also. And he went round the huge Indian subcontinent, and he collected different specimens of spoken and written language forms available at that time, especially Sanskrit language. And he standardized the grammatical system and wrote this unique book, which was a great discovery for the Indologists. Of course, we call them Indologists today, but they were great students of Oriental culture right from 18th century onwards. So that is only that relates to Sanskrit, that we speak and write today. But Sanskrit language predates Panini, it existed thousands of years before Panini. The language that you find Rigveda Samhita, which is the oldest possible language you can think of, it actually doesn't follow Panini's grammatical system completely. And Panini studied that language system also, and he evolved a standardized grammatical system for Sanskrit grammar. So, as you're talking about Indo-European languages, the connection between Sanskrit and Indo-European languages, or Indo-Iranian languages, or sometimes called, that was the result of a comprehensive effort on the part of European scholars who studied the grammatical system of Panini, and he found out, to their surprise, many common threads run through different language systems of Europe and also India, including Sanskrit. So they found that there was great affinity between Sanskrit and the old Greek and old Latin. Of course, that means modern languages of Europe, like German or Nordic languages like German, Swedish, and Swiss, and also English, and in the Latin languages like Spanish and Italian, all these, like French, all these languages of somewhere or other they have some connection with Sanskrit. They said there was a common ancient root from which Sanskrit was the direct evolute, and over the several centuries they evolved into different language systems in Europe, both Latin and also both Hellenic, that is Latin language, and also Nordic languages.
Thank you.
Thank you.
One question
Yeah.
on you mentioned about surrendering, total surrender, and also Ishvara Pranidhana.
Yeah.
Both the total surrender is how your spiritual journey starts, and Ishvara Pranidhana is at the peak of it.
Yeah.
So my question is, what is the difference in the mindset of the individual going through that when you are at the total surrender and at the time of Ishvara Pranidhana?
So what I mentioned was Ishvara Pranidhanatva. This is the sutra in this context. That is the 23rd sutra in Samadhipada. And before this, in the Sadhanapada, we discussed the first sutra itself, that defines Kriya Yoga, that is Tapas Swadhyaya Ishvara Pranidhananani Kriya Yoga. That is the first sutra of Sadhanapada. So now, in Sadhanapada, Ishvara Pranidhana is described as one of the elements that constitute Kriya Yoga. That is Tapaha, Swadhyaya, and Ishvara Pranidhana. One of the three elements that constitute Kriya Yoga. Means extreme self-effort, concentration, and study and all that, reading scriptures, chanting mantras, and so on. And then, of course, surrender. Now, what is that surrender? How that surrender is different from Ishvara Pranidhana that we discussed in Samadhipada? That's the question. Well, the Kriya Yoga is the beginning of the journey. How do you turn to spiritual life? When a person makes various efforts to get satisfaction, contentment, some kind of inner fulfillment, he makes various efforts. And then he becomes aware of the need to practice some spiritual disciplines. At that time, he turned to God. He has not surrendered, but he understands that without turning to God, Ishvara, he will not be able to even begin his spiritual journey. Even to meditate, to read a book, a devotional book, or to listen to lecture talking about philosophy and mysticism of God, you need some degree of, let's say, attachment, a great interest, a great affinity to a spiritual idea. Without that, no one can take to spiritual life. That is the part of Kriya Yoga. Here, it is something different. After practicing all these, if a person, and it really works, if practicing all this, if he going through different obstacles that we antarayas that we already discussed in sadhana pada as well. When conflicts or anxieties and worries, etc., and then but still you feel that you are not making enough progress, then if you just surrender, then what happens, our mind suddenly gets a new energy. It's something you get a kind of spiritual energy, energized, we get invigorated, because actually it's something like, well, a stream. Suppose before that you are just a stream, just a little water. If during summer there is no water in that stream, only during rainy season you have some water. But suppose you connect that stream with an ocean, the Pacific Ocean, you get water throughout the year. So surrender is something like connecting the stream, your little eye, to this cosmic reality. So that you cut a canal, and through the canal the water flows to the stream from the ocean. You are connecting yourself to the ocean. Very often, in modern times, one of the most major serious problems the spiritual seekers do face, they're fully convinced, intellectually, they can teach you better than anyone else. They're fully convinced, they have no doubt, but you cannot do that. There is, as if there's an invisible dead wall that you cannot cross. So very often, in such a situation, complete surrender, it will actually will be the easiest and most simple direct path. That will, it removes all the shackles, it breaks all the chains. Otherwise, you are just going round and round, but you are just like a boat that is, Sri Ramakrishna says, a boat that is tied to the anchor. And the whole night somebody was rowing, but he was going around the anchor. Maybe a pole that to which that boat was tied. You don't travel one mile if you work hard for the whole night. You can't do that. But if you just break the chain, you break that rope that connects that ties the boat to the anchor, and then you start rowing. You will be traveling. You travel long distance. You get across the ocean. So surrender has this effect, actually, really speaking. And in spiritual psychology, it works like magic. But for that, one needs complete sincerity, honesty, and integrity. That is very difficult. That's the main problem. See, everyone is convinced of the usefulness, the practical value of surrender. But the mind suddenly throws up doubts at that time when you try to do that. But it is possible for one to get over this dilemma by constant effort. And Yoga Sutra, Buddhism and Hinduism tell you, if you make a lot of efforts in this life, maybe next life you find it easy. That's one important aspect of, that's a dividing line between the Abrahamic traditions and yoga, Hinduism, etc. If you put some money in the bank will not close. When you die, you die with the checkbook and fountain pen in your pockets, and you reborn again with the same checkbook and fountain pen. That's an important thing, that samskaras, good vasanas will remain with us when we are born again. So, see, if you find people, young people, sometimes not so old, maybe a little, but they become great devotees so quickly, that's because they traveled a long distance in previous life. That's the point. That's why they are starting the journey from where they left in their previous life. That's how Buddhism and Hinduism and this yoga, all that, interpret this spiritual journey of man. Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
So thank you for all the great questions and questioners. Thank you. Namaskar.
Go ahead, Jack. Your question. Next.
Any more?
Yes,
most
Swamiji, I had a question.
Yeah.
When we think of Ishvara and yoga, is the correlate? How does that correlate to Brahman in Vedanta? Are we talking about a similar entity?
Yeah, really, well, surrender, self-surrender, Ishvara Pradhana, these ideas relevant only in Bhakti Yoga, not in Vedanta. But Shankaracharya says that this Bhakti Yoga disciplines and practice, they will make us fit for this highest realization of Brahman. It will make our mind ready to eventually reach that goal. That's what Shankara said, the great Vedantin says. Yeah.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. So, if there is any more questions, otherwise I shall close. So,
Swamiji, I have a question.
Yeah.
For this Savarna.
Yeah.
So, what is the root of the word pranava?
Oh, pranava.
Yeah.
Pranava, prana means complete dedication, complete surrender. Pranava is the word used in literature to call Omkara. Omkara is really not a word. Pranava is a word. So, Pranava is the word that we use to call, to indicate Omkara. Pranava itself means something that saves you. Prakashena trayate means it's that actually that's the meaning of avadhadu also. One of the meanings given by Panini for avadhadu, from which Omkara comes, is protection, saving from worldly bondages. That is the real meaning of pranava also.
So Om is not a word, it is a sound.
Yeah,
so
it is a sound. It is a sound. And remember, I will make it clear. Omkara is not what you see written in a book or a blackboard. Omkara is what you hear when somebody utters. See, you may, sometimes, in big meditation rooms, they have the huge golden, brilliant picture of Omkara, that Devanagari writing, something like the curved. No, that is not Omkara. That is only an attempt to put in one script. The same Omkara in English is put differently. In Russian, German, in French, and different languages, in Japanese or whatever language you may have, even in Indian languages, it's put differently. So, there is no unity with regard to what you see on a piece of paper or on the blackboard. Omkara is what you hear and not what you see. And here also, Omkara, Om. So it should be very long. It's called Pluta. If somebody say Om, that is not Omkara. So, Omkara has to be pronounced as Pluta. Shankaracharya says in the Mandukya Bhashya. So very clearly stated, Shankaracharya has explained Pranavopasana. We are giving the Mandukya Bhashya, Mandukya Upanishad, Mandukya Kariga and Mandukya Kariga Bhashya by Shankaracharya and Anandagiri's Tiga on Mandukya Bhashya of Shankara. These four texts together we are giving classes. We stopped during these last 2-3 months. I could not continue. We are going to continue again Only 26 classes are already there. If you go to the website, you can see. So I think we reach somewhere near the Pranavopasana. So Shankaracharya makes it very clear that it is not what you see in any script. It is what you hear. So if you are going to a meditation room and if there is some kind of Omkara symbol written in front of you in a wooden piece with brilliant light, don't focus on that curved thing. You focus on what you hear. They may also be playing. That you should concentrate on. Not on that wooden thing that you see in front of you. Because that is only Sanskrit presentation. And remember, no script can really do full justice to the sound. Sound can only be heard. Sound can never be written. So every written word is only an attempt to represent a sound. Sound can only be heard. So Omkara is sound, not written symbol. It's an important thing to remember. So when we use word Omkara, word symbol, it is not word symbol that is written, it is symbol that you hear. For hearing you have to explain, for that you need words. That's right. It's an important thing to remember. Don't focus on the curved thing that is in front of you when you go to meditation room. You focus on what you hear if they are playing Omkara. That is what you should focus on. That is the essence. That is constituted by Akara, Ukara, and Makara. That should be understood. It is not what yeah, please continue.
So if Omkara is just a sound, then how can it have a root? Root has a meaning, right?
No, that Omkara, it originated in Sanskrit, After all, Omkara, the idea of Omkara, Upasana as a spiritual practice originated among the great sages who wrote about Omkara. You can find in the Mandukya Upanishad, which is from Atharva Veda. It's an elaborate description. Of course, in other book, Brihadaranyaka, Chandogya, in other works also, there are clear explanation. Other Upanishads also you find, even the Gita also there is Omkara, Omkara is explained. So the point is, the origin of this concept may be from Vedas, and especially in Atharva Veda, that is Mandukya. Remember, not Mundaka Upanishad, Mandukya Upanishad. Mandukya Upanishad, Mandukya Kariga by Gaudapada, then Mandukya Bhashya Upanishad and Kariga Bhashya by Shankaracharya, and Anandagiri Tika. You can find in the classes, you can find the link in the website, our San Francisco Vedanta Society, Northern California San Francisco Vedanta Society website. The classes you find. So Mandukya Upanishad is the one that clearly explains these Pranavopasana. Of course, there are other Upanishads also. So that sound symbol was originally formulated in written script in Sanskrit, historically speaking. That's how they began.
Maharaj, another question. So if there is a special kind of Purusha, so that means there are multiple Purushas.
No.
So in the same context, like if there are multiple Purushas, are there multiple Prakritis also?
No, Prakriti is one. Prakriti is one. Purushas are many. Prakriti is one. But this Purusha, that's why clearly explained in the Yoga Sutra. This Purusha is singular. So, you see, in the Saha, Purvesham api Guruhu. So singular. That Purusha, that Ishvara is one. And is the Guru of all others. That is the yogi concept of, the yoga concept of Ishvara. it is single. Saha means is singular. Guruhu is singular. Saha Guru. Purvesham. Big Guru. So this is important.
Maharaj, pranam.
Yeah.
This is Desha. I have to leave now. Thank you very much for a brilliant presentation.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. Any more question? Most welcome. Thank you then. So remember Saugata, so please remember, the important point remember is in the yoga system they accept an Ishvara. But that Ishvara is different from the Ishvara concept that we have in the Vaishnava, Shakta, Shaiva or other systems of Hinduism or in Abrahamic religions as we consider God, etc. Because in these traditions, the God idea is the God who creates, who preserves, who listens to our prayers, who fulfills our prayers and so on. But this Ishvara is conceived to be the great grand teacher. And that idea is explained logically, an attempt is made to explain that idea with the help of inference, anumana, pramana. That's all. So we should not, you should only have an intellectual interest. That's why Swami Vivekananda, to avoid all confusions, he brought so much of Vedanta into his interpretation of Yoga Sutras. This is an important point to remember. That's a great difference between Swamiji's interpretation of Yoga Sutra and the traditional interpretation of Yoga Sutra, except of course by others like Vijnana Bhikshu and others. Swamiji brings in so much of Vedanta. Vijnana Bhikshu also does the same thing. Okay? Thank you. Namaskar. Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om Tat Sat Sri Ramakrishna Arpanamastu.
Thank you, Swami.
Thank you.
Thank you, Swamiji.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Swami.
Thank you, Maharaj.
Thank you.
Thank you, Swami.